Hello, good day. My name is Angela Carnwright, and I'm here for episode 10 of Lab Talk. Today, we're going to talk about how to choose the right cold storage for your lab. So without further ado, I'm going to jump in here. We have a special treat. We're going to combine our slide presentation with a demo using our immersive lab technology. So we will have some of our team members helping to show some of the points that we're trying to make. So what we're going to do is run through today some of the tips and tricks on, how do I choose the right cold storage product for my lab? And when I think about the time I've spent, at least in the laboratory environment, I used to work with a lot of analysis equipment, things like cell imaging, qPCR, gel imaging. And when you're trying to troubleshoot assays at that level, at that analysis phase, we didn't really give a lot of thought to the way that our reagents or our samples were stored and what they were stored in. But the reality is, it can really have an impact, right? So we want to make sure that we're conserving the integrity of your samples, the integrity of your reagents, so that when you go to, perform your experiments and your protocols, that this is certainly not a variable you have to worry about when it comes to troubleshooting. So we want to make sure you have success from the beginning. And second of all, we want to talk about this because we have, if you're taking care of your cold storage and you've selected it with all of these, we're going to go through 10 steps that will help you. You can actually reduce your cost of ownership for the products over time. So think about it from both keeping your research up and running and setting you up for success in that format, but also from an operations standpoint. Hopefully these tips will help you set yourself up for success and hopefully reduce the cost of ownership over the long term. So getting started, you want to think about your cold storage requirements by answering a series of questions. And this can be helpful in aligning your project to business strategies within your group, whether it's your research group or your production group. It can help with efficient operations. It can help manage quality expectations. It can help with facility and maintenance requirements, and also testing and validation requirements. So we're going to walk through these steps, and I'm going to welcome the Immersive Lab on camera here. So welcome to the team in the Immersive Lab. So here you can see in the Immersive Lab, we have this awesome lineup of cold storage equipment from on the left-hand side, we have the 5-degree refrigerator units, and actually that's a brand new one on the far left that we just launched. We also have freezers, so -30 freezers kind of in the middle there. And then toward the right-hand side, we shift to -80. And then at the very far left, we shift to the cryo instruments. So we do have all these options here. We're going to walk through a few tips and hopefully use these tools as a way to showcase the tips as we go. So the first question you want to ask is, how much storage space do you need? So it helps you determine the size of the product that you need, but it also helps you determine some of the sample requirements that you're going to be storing. It makes you think about what you're putting inside the unit. So what are your long-term needs? Do you prefer upright units versus chest units? Do you have storage that you need to have on backup for defroster maintenance, or maybe in an emergency you want to have some backup storage? So this is thinking storage space, right? How much actual storage space do I need now? How much will I need 2 years from now? How much will I need if there's an emergency? These are all things you want to consider. Then you want to think about ambient heat and emergency power. So let's talk about ambient heat for a second. If we zoom in here on a couple of the cold storage units, you'll see that space that we've carefully left between the units. The space is important, and this is partly something that you'll find in the user manual, right? The guidelines on that, but it's also it's there for a reason, right? It's there to help dissipate heat, to help your unit perform the best that it can. So you want to think about that as you're considering the cold storage, that you have the appropriate amount of space between the units. You want to think about backup systems. Do you want to have, does your power have emergency backup? Do you want to have other types of backup systems in place? And then thinking about, contingency plans around if there is a problem, how do you want to handle it? And certainly our team can help you walk through some of our options, but certainly ask your vendors of your current cold storage what you can do now to mitigate that. Your building operations people will be super helpful with this as well. And then number 3, think about the voltage. So we have a special guest in the Immersive Lab today. It is our Dr. Roberts. She's here to show us and remind us actually about how important it is to choose the right voltage so that you can plug in your instrument when it arrives. So when you get your cold storage unit, you don't want to be stuck without being able to plug it in. And I can tell you from experience that this has happened so many times in the field where there might be a bit of a disconnect between maybe where the final landing place is for a cold storage unit and then who's ordering it. Definitely have that conversation before the order. It'll save you time. It'll save you cost for any types of exchanges or like new orders that you have to place because of that. So this will get you up and running much quicker. So thank you, Dr. Roberts, for that reminder. Next, you want to think about the desired temperature. So as I showed you earlier with the Immersive Lab, we have this really nice range from left to right. As we look at this graph here on the slide, it really starts at that 5-degree range for refrigeration, heads over to the -20, -30 range. We have the -80s. We have 2 different options there. And then we start to look at cryopreservation around -196. So think about that desired temperature set point. And then one other thing when we think about temperature is really around what's acceptable for a range of performance around that set point temperature. And so we've included in the resources a really nice technical note on the peak variation. I encourage you to have a look at that because it is important to think about what you're buying, the performance that it is offering within a certain range, and then what your samples or your reagents that you're storing within that unit, what they can handle from a variation standpoint. So this is really important when you select the type of cold storage. So it could be that it's not just, buying a refrigerator at, a retail store. This is your samples. This is your life's work. You want to think about what tolerance there is with what you're storing inside that unit. So definitely take a look at that and certainly talk to our team if you want to about some of the options that we offer within the different categories. Next, you're talking about storage process. So when we think about these units, they're not always just sitting there with the door closed, at temperature, right? People are in and out of them. People are using them, right? They're storing their samples in. There's Danny. He's, in there retrieving his samples several times a day, perhaps. If you have a very busy lab, you might be in more than several times a day. So you want to think about the format, maybe having a really big freezer like that -80. If you're in and out so often, it might take longer to recover to temperature. Maybe 2 smaller ones might be a better solution if you have a very, very busy freezer, or maybe thinking about long-term versus short-term storage and splitting it up into 2 or multiple units. So just a few things to think about. When we think about qualification, this goes back to that tolerance, right? So what is the acceptable criteria? Do you have that defined? Does your organization have, SOPs in place for IQ, OQ, how you qualify the fridge? I know we do have some content that we've built on temperature mapping and some guidance on how we can best map and showcase the temperatures in the units. Certainly we have all of the resources available for each model that we offer on the variance at each probe placement within the unit. So think about what your samples need as far as the variation or tolerance. And then if you need help, we certainly have the Unity Lab Services team that can help you with that compliance portion. Next, we're going to shift into remote monitoring. So question number 7 is thinking about the remote monitoring. So a lot of units will have internal alarms built in. So if you leave the door open, it starts beeping at you. You can hear an audible alarm, maybe a visual alarm on the unit. But what happens if you're not in the lab, if you're not in your facility when that alarm goes off? Well, you don't know it, you can't hear it, right? So the remote monitoring is critical for you to be able to react quickly in the case of an emergency, right? So that you can actually recover your samples, get them to a safe location, and ensure that you have the integrity. I mean, think about what could be stored in a freezer. It could be your life's work, and it's really hard to replace some of those samples. So certainly think about remote monitoring, whether it's an external unit, whether we have built-in Wi-Fi on some of our products. There's lots of options out there between, just thinking about asset management or just simple remote monitoring. Certainly something to consider in every sale, every time you invest in cold storage. And I will just caveat that if you're thinking remote monitoring, think beyond just your cold storage. There are other critical items in your lab that could be part of the same system. So it could be helpful for the entire laboratory operation. Next, we're going to talk about service. So thank you, Danny, for showing us the remote monitoring. That was our SmartView Pro system. That was awesome. So next, you want to talk about service and support. And when you're looking at purchasing a new product, you don't want to just think about, when you have that initial warranty, perhaps you want to think about, the 5-year plan. And maybe it's that you want to buy extended warranty with that unit. Maybe you have internal support for with maintenance and operations, and then that's covered. So think about that long-term plan. If something should go wrong, that you have the support that you need when you need it. And again, we have our Unity Lab Services solutions that can help with that for sure. And finally, I think this isn't finally, actually, we have 9 and 10 left, but when we think about your sample storage strategy, so we've gone through the size, the temperature, we've gone through remote monitoring, we've gone through clearance. Now let's talk about your sample storage strategy. Like how are you managing your equipment? And a lot of times we have to think about it. Here in this view, you see the freezer rack. We've placed it on the counter here just to showcase it. But you can see it has those white cardboard boxes in there to help you keep your samples organized. So having a map on the outside of your freezer can be really helpful. But also think about more advanced solutions on, whether it's dense storage that you want to look at, whether it's barcoding strategies so that you know exactly what you're looking for. You can find it right down to that sample tube in the box, right in the rack, in the freezer, on the right shelf. We can actually help you with, thank you, Danny, to show us the 2D barcoded solutions to help you really look at that full workflow from accessioning to sample storage, and then later on when you're ready to find it for that easy retrieval. So what does that do? That helps you find what you need quicker, so your door opening time is shorter, but it also helps you keep organized so that you know exactly what's in every single box in your freezer, exactly where to find it, so you have an easy inventory at any time. And this is critical when it comes to actual operating your lab, right? I've seen so many freezers, and this is not a dig at anybody specifically, but there's so many different lab people using the same freezer that it tends to get like really crowded and really messy with different boxes and different vessels everywhere. Think ahead before you start buying your new solution. Is there a way that you can consolidate that, to organize it, to help the performance long term, but also make it easier for your lab team, right, to find their samples? And then last but not least, you've taken all this care in selecting the right product. You want to make sure it fits through the door. So not only do you need the right plug to get up and running quickly, but you want to make sure that that freezer fits through the door. So what do? You want to make sure, thank you, Danny, he's getting our freezer ready. There's our doorway. What can you do? You make sure that before you put that purchase order in, that you measure your doorways. Maybe you even think about the path from the elevator, from the loading dock to the elevator, and from the elevator to your lab or your freezer room. What does that path look like? And we have some tools to help you with that as well. We have a lab design tool that can help you decide, hey, do I need that really big unit? Because maybe it won't fit through my door. Maybe I'll have to send it back. Or maybe 2 smaller units would actually accomplish the same goal, but be a lot easier to get up and running. So that's it for our 10 tips. Think about it from the beginning. These questions that we've presented are pretty important when it comes to what your end goals are. And then we want to make sure that you can get up and running as quickly as possible and have success throughout the entire process, so that you don't have to think about your cold storage. You just grab your samples, grab your products, know that they're going to be kept at the right temperature, know that they're going to be easy access, so that you can go and focus on your protocols and your science.